Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I work at Synchrony as a front-end developer. It's so good to see everyone here. Welcome to the second day of conference. Uh, so my first question for you all is, how many people here have heard of Synchrony? Oh, wow. That's actually more than I expected. I didn't know what Synchrony was until last year, but Synchrony provides the financial layer behind a lot of clients like Amazon, Walmart, Lowe's, Sam's Club. And the challenge behind this was, how do we scale and maintain consistency across all the UI for all these different clients and different products and different services that we're offering? And so this is where the idea of a component library came in and the answer to our challenge. So first off, what is a component library? Every user interface that you see is made up of components. Each you can look at each field as Lego blocks that, when coming together, makes up a form field. So the text field with the button, additional form text fields all come together and make that form field the Lego blocks that are the building pieces of the interface or application that you see. Why do component libraries matter? One, for UI consistency, to ensure that the design is uniform across all the different products that you have, like I mentioned earlier, to reduce technical debt. When you have one singular place that the component is defined, designed, and developed, you can reduce technical debt and not have one team be working on, let's say, the credit card form and another team be working on the same credit card form, but for a different client, and the UI is not consistent, developed differently with different solid principles. That causes technical debt later on for whoever onboards into the company. And I'm sorry, my boyfriend is staring at me, smiling. He's not in tech, but he's here to support me, and it means a lot. And 3, for scalable growth. Again, as we continue, the company hopefully continues to grow and we build more products. We want everything as seamless as possible. So I'm here to talk about the blueprint that we have found successful for architecting a scalable, maintainable component library. So first, we're going to talk about the foundation principles, understanding this philosophy that Kent C. Dodds came up with. This is a React philosophy for compound components, where we we compose over configuration. So we try to make the building blocks and not have one singular component be configured to do like 10 different things. We want each component to do one thing and one thing really well. 2, the building blocks. When we're building an application or a product, it can be a lot. And so we want to start with atomic components and start with small components that build up into that bigger component, like I was mentioning earlier, with building a button component, a text field component that ends up making the form field component. And this is just a small example, but if you look at the devices that you use and the apps that you use, you can see like how complex things can really get. And 3, I'll talk about our implementation, the tools and patterns and best practices that we have found useful. And yeah, so let's get into it. Now, the problem with the configuration is that it can get very complex. You can have one component with 10, 20, 30 props. In our case, when we initially had our component library, it was ad hoc and just a bunch of developers throwing together components not really being maintained. And so if we needed, let's say one company needs this functionality, we would just add a prop that could do that functionality instead of taking the time to build thoughtful components. And so this is why we choose to use composition over configuration, so that when each use case requires new configuration, your component doesn't become a liability, doesn't become a liability instead of an asset. Sorry, got that mixed up. So again, just want to emphasize the core philosophy of composition over configuration. We're building the building blocks so that developers can use and build their components on their separate product teams, building out whatever it may be that they need. We just want to deliver the pieces for them and avoid using brittle props that lead to tech debt later on. That, again, just becomes very heavy if things change. It's already in the code base. And once it's in the code base, as a new developer, you don't really go and touch it and change it and fix it. You just do what the new requirements want you to do, right? And so we want to promote clarity. We want usability, code clarity, and easier testing workflows. Here is an example of configuration versus composition. So you'll see the button component. Here we have, I think, the 8 props that are all doing different things. And there's no way to know like where each prop is being applied. Like we have icon check, but then we have to add another prop to position it to the left. Whereas if you look on the composition approach, you have your button and you have your button dot icon, and you can move this around. You can move the icon before button dot text or after button dot text to position it either on the left side or the right side. You don't need to define that as a prop. Does anyone have any questions so far? Perfect. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with the foundation. This is a design principle by Brad Frost. If you've ever heard of him, he has broken down the foundation for building a successful design system into atoms, molecules, organisms, templates. You can call them whatever you would like, but this is the template that a lot of companies follow, and our company follows as well. So you have your smaller components like the buttons, the inputs, typography, which make up the search box, the font field, the card headers. And you use these and add to organisms to make a navigation bar, product list, and article. And again, like it gets even more complex when you start to build out templates, page layouts, bridge systems, and containers. So some key success factors that have been really helpful for us is discoverability, living documentation, and automated workflows, which I'm going to discuss in the next slide. So I'll come back to that. So compound components, if you remember the example from before, you have a parent component that manages the shared state or child components. With the button example, you had the button root is the parent component, and then the button dot icon is the child component. And again, you want each component to have one thing that they do well, and control their own behavior. Rendering props and sharing that complex logic, we can use state or context to share the context between each component. And then we want to separate each component with their UI concerns for business logic, testability, reusability, and code organization. So again, here is another example of the compound components in action. On the left, you have the traditional approach, which I'll be honest, when I first started coding, this is exactly how my components look. I would have one component and I would have a prop for the options for countries, a placeholder, a prop for choosing a country, searchable, add, and you're just continuing to add on all of these props to make it configurable to your needs. Whereas when you go with the compound component philosophy, you have your parent component, which is the select, and the select will handle the functionality of when you click on the select button and it drops down, it handles that one singular functionality. You have your trigger, which handles that one functionality, and select.value is just what is displayed in your trigger, that placeholder, that one prop, and then select.content. Content does one thing, search does one thing, and again, like everything has one thing that it does really well. These are the tools that we have found useful to empower this philosophy. Has anybody heard of Radix before? Or it might be Radix. Not sure how to say it, but awesome. Yeah, so Radix has accessibility built in, which makes it really great for a building block on top of your own components. They provide very unstyled, accessible components that you can then style yourself, but have the accessibility built in so that you're not having to worry about that. Obviously, you should still worry about accessibility, not what I'm saying, but it provides that foundation for you. And then we use Tailwind. You don't have to use Tailwind. A lot of people like it. A lot of people don't like it. It's personal preference. I will say that with Tailwind and using the Tailwind config, we have a design system that gives basically a design system will give you tokens, and that's their terminology. The tokens are just JSON variables that you can input into your Tailwind config, and it makes it really easy to have different themes. So we have different clients, like Walmart has a different UI, Sam's Club has a different UI, Verizon. We can just have their design brand and tokens in one theme and toggle back and forth using Tailwind. So it has been very powerful for us. Storybook is how many people have heard of Storybook? I think it's a little more popular also. I really like Storybook and its latest improvements that they've made, because now accessibility testing is baked in. You can have component testing baked in, and it's all in this really nice UI interface. And another thing that is really great about Storybook is that your product team or your designers or your managers can go in and look at, sorry. As I was saying, your product team or managers can go in and look at these components that you've built and do all the testing in there. Like, you don't need to wait to put it in a dev environment, bring that dev environment to those teams, or put it into production even, and start testing from there. You can test all inside of Storybook. And so it just makes really great for sharing across all different teams. And it's also really great for documentation, because your component already lives in Storybook. You can have the documentation pulled up next to your component so developers can easily understand what your component does, how the props work. They can even play with the props and toggle them on or off. And what we have found really helpful is that you can use MDX docs inside of Storybook. So we have a local showcase that local environment where we build and test out our components before we put them onto Storybook. And they're all just React components at the end of the day. And what you can do, since MDX can hold React components, we'll just import these components into an MDX file and that displays into Storybook. And so, yeah, if we have time after, I can show you. And then lastly, Yelp. So how it works at Synchrony is everything is a micro front end. Everything is a micro front end.
Yeah.
So let's think about when you go in to pay your credit card bill and you see the make a payment modal. That is a micro front end at Synchrony. And so with that, it kind of makes things a little hard to test components because everything is a micro front end. But with using Yelp, we're able to test locally and have Yelp basically import the component into our MSE locally, do all the testing, make all the updates, and it's going to show directly in the dev environment for that micro front end. So that's been a very powerful, useful tool for us. And again, just common our pitfalls to avoid and lessons that we've learned. The composition over configuration, having one component do one thing really well, and providing a better developer experience so that the developers actually use our components with good documentation in Storybook with clear examples. And just some final warning signs. If you see these in your component library, these are red flags. Components that have more than 10 props, nested ternary operators, developers avoiding using your components, breaking changes in minor versions. This is not good. And the same functionality being implemented multiple ways. So again, the takeaway, composition over configuration. And if you can, get your company to invest in having a component library that is being maintained. That makes a big difference. And just treating your component as a product that, your users are your developers and you want to build for them and gain feedback with each version that you put out and continuously improve on. And then again, start small and continue to build your way up as Lego blocks. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. And that.
Thanks.
Are there any questions? If not, I can do a quick showcase of Storybook.
Fine.
Do you mean with the philosophy of the composition? Yeah. So actually, as I said before, our component library has been ad hoc. And so it's been a bunch of developers building out components and just throwing it into this component library. And now that we are pushing for this composition philosophy, it's a lot different. They're going to have to spend some time to rework the code because we're now going from those 20 props to now having to build out components with subcomponents. We are getting pushback, but when we're able to demonstrate in the documentation the flexibility that it offers, where they now have the power in their hands to build out these components using the subcomponents, as long as you're able to express that, I don't think we've had any further pushback other than the initial internet. Yeah, that's a great question that I actually didn't cover. So like how are we handling the migration, the rollout of the newer components when all these components have already been built? Like why do this? um and the reason for doing it is when I mentioned before with technical debt, like that is becoming a big problem in the component library and across other teams with inconsistent designs with product. Now we're working directly with the design system team to make sure that all the components, when they're ready, will match and meet those requirements, and providing a rollout phase so we're not forcing everyone to upgrade all at the same time, because they are broken down into such small pieces. It makes it easier for them to go and rework it because they can add a little at a time. Um, and then having really good docs. I'm a really big believer of having good docs, having that migration guide of a 1-to-1, like this is how you migrate, was really helpful.
Not very good.
Okay. Hmm.
What?
Okay. So no. Yeah. Or yesterday I heard a really good talk about how you get how you make change happen. Because change is not easy. There's a lot that goes into it when you do have to change, especially something so big like this. And for us, like going directly to the higher ups and the stakeholders and being able to present maybe a working prototype of, how it could benefit the company. And really, when you believe in your vision, I think you can make others believe in your vision too. Um, but it does take having the research, and you have to give them something that they can see and believe. So, hopefully that answers your question.
Look how simple powered work. And it's um
It is. Right. How do I make sure that other developers are following the design patterns that we are following? Is that, or Is that right? Okay. Um, personally, we're out of time, so I'll answer your question out in the hallway. Thank you, everyone, for coming again. Maybe some luck.
Like, the default data, oh, yeah. If you buy